We've closed the book on yet another NFL draft, and we're going to talk about the fantasy implications on today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Welcome in. Lucas Wenzel and Tyler Plath hanging out with you. No Cameron today. He chose golf over fantasy football. Plain and simple. That's all you have to know.
It's disappointing. It's just disappointing. And I'm looking outside right now, and it's just cloudy and it's rainy. So he's just rubbing it in our face that he's out just playing some golf, and we're here, picking up the slack.
We're even going to talk about his guy, Keon Coleman, on today's episode. So he's really the biggest loser in this episode. We are going to talk about the biggest winners and losers in fantasy football from the NFL draft. Talk about that, 12 total players, and so much more. We could recap so much time, but this is the most succinct way in which we can do it. So let's just dive on in and start discussing. So again, we are going to discuss 12 total winners and losers in fantasy football from the NFL draft. We are going to go ahead and start with the winners. And Ty, I'll let you dive in with a player on the team who I actually think had the best draft this year. They did so many things to improve the situation for this player.
Yeah, it's Najee Harris. Pittsburgh, in what feels like in back-to-back years, because last year was also a very good draft for them, they have absolutely killed the draft process. Two very good classes, and especially this year, where the biggest need, the biggest hole on their team was the offensive line. And what did they do? They went out and spent their first two picks on the offensive line. First with Troy Fautanu, who is incredibly smooth. He is a very high floor offensive lineman. He can slide right in at left tackle for them. And then in the second round, they got Zach Frazier, who is just a bully in the middle, who is their new center now. And again, it just completes their offensive line, right? Fautanu to Sumalu at left guard. And they actually drafted Mason McCormick in the fourth round from South Dakota State. I'm a big fan of him too. So even if one of those two guards, who's James Daniels at right guard, one of those two guards goes down, McCormick can just slide right in, and they shouldn't really skip a beat, really. So their offensive line play is going to be significantly better. That gives Russ or Justin Fields, whoever's playing under center, more time in the pocket to deliver balls to George Pickens, who I also think is a winner, just a little bit too, just because there's no major competition against him after the draft. But you look at the way that the Steelers went about their draft. They said, we want to improve our offensive line so we can run the ball, because guess who's our offensive coordinator now? It's Arthur Smith, right? So Arthur Smith now has a really, really good offensive line, and I did some digging around. Just fun little note. The Steelers ran 12 personnel at the fourth highest rate of all teams last year. That's one running back, two tight ends. So you take the Steelers offensive line, you have Pat Freiermuth, and do you remember that guy Darnell Washington, who was a 6'7" tight end from last year? Yeah, he's their tight end too. So if everything points to Pittsburgh wanting to run the ball more, Najee Harris is going to benefit in a big way from that, and he's going to be one of my favorite targets this year in fantasy.
Yeah, I'm going to be so fascinated to see what this does to he and Jaylen Warren's stock in fantasy drafts, and specifically in Best Ball Mania. That's dropping. Well, that will have already dropped by the time you hear this episode. We're recording this Sunday afternoon. You'll get this Tuesday morning. So Best Ball Mania would have already dropped yesterday, so you can go check that out. I'm really curious to see where Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren end up in those best ball drafts as well. Because again, you look at the Falcons' rush attacks under Arthur Smith. We're talking about a guy who ran the ball at a top 3 rate in the league, and they were so efficient on the ground. Or you give Arthur Smith a good offensive line, he will run his offense through the running backs, and all you need to do is give the quarterback enough time for easy completions as well. So I 100% agree. I'm gonna throw this tidbit in there because I freaking love Zach Frazier, man. I do. I thought he had round one upside. I thought enough teams would, kind of go through the Creed Humphrey route with him, right? When you look back and see that the Kansas City Chiefs got Creed Humphrey, and you're like, man, How do we get a center like that? How do we get an interior offensive lineman like that? And Zach Frazier to me has like Creed Humphrey level toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And you add that to an Arthur Smith run offense, to a Pittsburgh Steelers front. I think it's wheels up for Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren this year. So I couldn't agree more. I think both of them are big winners from the 2024 NFL draft. I'm going to go ahead. I'm kind of going to name the obvious one. It's Kyler Murray. Look, you go out, you get a Marvin Harrison Jr., you beef up the defense a little bit. You give him Trey Benson now as well, who now, keep in mind, James Conner, he's in the last year of his contract. You love the spot for Trey Benson, though, because as soon as James Conner's out, that backfield is all Trey Benson's, right? Early third round pick, second running back off the board after Jonathan Brooks. But really what you were looking for and hoping for with Kyler is that he gets his stud wide receiver one, right? And Monty Osfort didn't think twice. He might have thought twice, but he didn't get cute with it. A lot of people thought, well, he's got all these picks. What if he just racked up a bunch more and then came swinging in the back half of the first round, traded up in the second round for more players? Nope. He said, we need to go get our guy. So they got a Marvin Harrison Jr., the best wide receiver prospect we've probably seen since a Julio Jones, since a Jamar Chase. This guy is going to be great. He's going to be Kyler's best friend along Trey McBride. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside. Trey McBride, on the inside. And you don't mind a little gadget guy, Greg Dortch. You don't mind Michael Wilson, who much better against zone than against man, but you're not gonna have to worry about it because Marvin Harrison steps into a situation where he is the alpha. He's going to command a ton of targets, and that only helps Kyler Murray. So I love Kyler Murray coming up this year. I think he's going to be one of my favorite quarterbacks to draft. Before the NFL draft, he was going as like the quarterback 10 on Underdog Fantasy. I'm scooping up that value all day long, man. I think he gets his legs back underneath him this year. He gets his alpha wideout. You get him Trey McBride. Massive winner here for Kyler Murray.
That was really the biggest threat to Kyler Murray is Arizona continuing to just trade backs and get more picks and stuff. And, there's always value in certain, you can find a receiver in the third round or something like that. But getting a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. is what's really going to elevate his game in fantasy. So now the question is this Arizona offense going to take a step forward? And I think getting a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. certainly makes it all the more realistic that this offense can take another step forward.
Couldn't agree more. And we're just going to keep it moving. We're going to talk about another wide receiver who finds himself in a really good situation. And maybe Marv's situation isn't good, but obviously it makes Kyler a plus. But we're going to move on. We're going to talk about a few rookies here as well. Ty, I'm glad you're talking about this player because I think we needed to at some point. I'm just going to preface it with Laddie
boy. Laddie McConkey is probably my biggest fantasy wide receiver winner outside of really the big three. Just because he's going into a situation in LA where he is going to just get peppered with targets because he's just going to be getting open the most between Quinn Johnson, between Josh Palmer, Brendan Rice, who they took in the 7th round. There's really just no one, at least in my opinion, that is of the quality of Ladd McConkey that is going to take away targets from him. I would not be surprised if Ladd McConkey is the leading target getter on this Chargers offense. And we all know, again, that they will want to run the ball, but you still have to throw the ball at least like 20, 25 times a game, at least, right? So, like I said, I think Ladd, he is immediately like their slot wide receiver starter. I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to be used almost in every kind of package, to be honest, because I think he can play on the outside a little bit too. I don't know. I like the landing spot. I think, again, the type of wide receiver that he is, just a pure separator, pure route runner, it can only mean good things for him and Justin Herbert. So that's going to be, you brought up Best Ball Mania with, who was it? With Najee and Jaylen Warren. I'm going to be interested to see where Ladd and Justin Herbert go in Best Ball Manias, because I think a lot of people are going to be like, this Chargers offense is going to be really, really gross. There's still going to be value in those guys because they are just going to be a very, very well in sync and connected tandem for the Chargers.
You want to take a stab at where Justin Herbert was going prior to the NFL draft in big board drafts on Underdog?
Was he quarterback 14?
He was quarterback 14. He was going outside of the top 12.
Crazy.
Which I don't blame people for thinking that. I think when you look at some of the other quarterbacks, you get the Dak Prescotts that are creeping up in there as well. Obviously, you got the big ones, the Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, yada, yada. I've been on the record saying that Ladd is just going to be a really, really, really freaking good wide receiver 2 in the NFL. I think this is the one spot that he could have landed that my tune is changing a little bit, that I think Ladd actually has upside to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Because who else is he going to be? Josh Palmer, who hasn't done it his entire career, Quentin Johnston, who the coaching staff has lost trust in and isn't this team or this regime's guy that they took last year. Like, Ladd might be the guy here. And I think my tune's going to change a little bit of, I'm very interested. I know they're going to want to run the football. But man, I'm going to be scooping up Ladd, I think, in quite a few of the later rounds, as he's going to get off to a slow start. There's no question. These rookies always blossom in the second half of the season. I think you're going to get that with Ladd as he gets more in sync with Justin Herbert, as he has such clean route running, such sure hands. And that's just not something that these Chargers weapons on the outside had. So when you beef up the O-line with Joe Alt at 5, you come back and you get Ladd McConkey in the early second, which is something that I thought was extremely lucky for the Chargers. I literally made an entire video about it, and that was kind of what I concluded was, you know what? You either trade back or you take Alt at 5 and you take a Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell in the early second round. That's exactly what they did. So I agree. Ladd is a massive, massive winner here. Is there you want to put a bow on Ladd here?
I agree in the sense that his lookout for like his NFL career is a wide receiver 2. But that's why I've kind of put him down as a winner for really at least this year, maybe even next year. If they are not going to bring in another guy with like first round capital or go spend big money in free agency on a wide receiver, Ladd McConkey, it will be their wide receiver 1 for 2 years. So in that sense too, like you're probably going to get a value on him in your fantasy drafts because again, no one wants to be in on the Chargers offense. But there is still value in his role, especially with the wide receiver room that the Chargers have.
Let's do a quick little exercise for the people because I think we're in dynasty season right now. We're in rookie draft season right now because we just started our first rookie draft 3 hours ago before this recording. A lot of you are probably already starting your rookie drafts as well. Let's do a little bit of an exercise, Ty. Let's see when you would take Ladd McConkey in your rookie drafts. I think we both agree this is probably the most ideal landing spot for him, but let's run it through. So obviously we'll go super flex. At the top, you got Caleb Williams, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Jane Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze. Brian Thomas Jr., you're still taking ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. as well?
I think for Brian Thomas Jr., it depends on where your team is at. If you need someone that's guaranteed to just immediately contribute right away, I would go Ladd. But I do think that Brian Thomas Jr. has the higher ceiling from a talent perspective. So when we, and I always want to err on the side of talent versus situation, even though situation can be a benefit to players. I think I will more times than not, I'll probably still go Brian Thomas, but I think it's a lot closer now that we know landing spots.
Interesting. See, I'm pretty confident I'd still be taking Brian Thomas ahead of Ladd McConkey. We'll kind of talk about Jacksonville wide receivers a little bit later, but the quarterback. So you taking Drake May, JJ McCarthy ahead of him as well?
Yeah, in super flex, yes.
Yep, I would as well. I think this is where it starts to get interesting. You going Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey?
Probably Brock Bowers still. I wouldn't like it just because it feels gross, but I do think, again, Brock Bowers has got the skill set and the talent to be, again, more so of a weapon than he is a traditional tight end. The situation's not great, but I would probably still lean Bowers just slightly.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take Bowers and the quality prospect that he is there. I'm still kind of confused how it's going to look with him and Michael Mayer. more on that to come, but I think I'd go Bowers as well. How about Bo Nix? Again, keep in mind, Superflex here.
I'd probably do Ladd. The thing that I keep trying to have to remind myself about with Bo Nix is that he does have some sneaky kind of escapability and mobility. Can he find the end zone a couple times in the season? Sure, but I'm not expecting him to be like a 5, 6, or 7 rushing touchdown kind of quarterback, because if he was, then I would say Bo Nix without a doubt. But it's not enough mobility for me to get to buy in a Bo Nix over Ladd, so I'd probably go Ladd over Nix.
This is where the break definitely is for me, because on the one hand, I really want to try and buy into Bo Nix, but if I am a team that needs another quarterback and I am fairly loaded at wide receiver, I'm going to take a Bo Nix. If I need a quarterback 3, I need an upgrade there, I'll probably take Bo Nix. If I'm drafting Ladd to be like my wide receiver 5, that's where I'm more interested in Bo Nix. But if I'm thin at wide receiver, I might lean a Ladd McConkey there. I think that's the last name I'm going to bring up. Any of the running backs, Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, any of them ahead of Ladd McConkey?
I would say the Ladd is in that tier. I would probably take Brooks over Ladd. I would probably take Ladd over Trey Benson, though.
That would make, I'm struggling to figure out where I want to put Jonathan Brooks. Obviously coming off the ACL, but lands in Carolina. I know it's not great, but Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders ain't it. Okay, they ain't holding the torch to Jonathan Brooks. So on the one hand, I'm like, wow, you know what, Bryce Young loading up on weapons on offense. Now they traded for Deontay Johnson. You still got Adam Thielen there. Got Jonathan Brooks in the backfield. Drafted Xavier Legette in the first round. I didn't love that pick, but that's more so of a value and a my preference kind of a thing than it is like a knock on Xavier Legette per se. But I don't hate it for Jonathan Brooks, but I think I would take Brooks ahead of Ladd. Benson is the only one where I would probably seriously think about it, because he will be the starter for Arizona. It depends on how scarce you want to try and treat the running back position. So let's move on. Let's talk about another rookie wide receiver, Ty. I was considering bringing up Keon Coleman's name in that discussion. Obviously, he lands with the Buffalo Bills, who are in desperate need of a wide receiver 1 right now. If you would have asked me before the NFL draft if I would have thought Keon Coleman ended up a Buffalo Bill, I probably would have said no, because I would have assumed they took one in the first round and then went defensive back in the second round, which they did. Cole Phillips, baby, called that one. Bishop, thank you. I said Phillips. Well, I don't know why I keep butchering Bishop specifically. When I made that video, I definitely called him Cole Phillips, and I said, wait, that's not right. And I went back and I literally had Bishop in my script. But Cole Bishop, right? So they did go defensive back. I didn't expect Keon Coleman to be a Buffalo Bill. That being said, it does kind of make sense, because you look at the guys in which they brought in this offseason, the guys in which they still have on this offense. The Khalil Shakir, the Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid, all these gadgety, short distance guys. They're not running many downfield routes. And then you just go ahead and look at Keon Coleman's game. And it's downfield contested catch. Major boom upside for Keon Coleman in this offense, I think, when he is the perimeter guy. And then you add in, there's reports Josh Allen texted Keon Coleman during the draft. Hey, you're my guy. I want you. You're my guy. So if Josh Allen is already vibing with Keon Coleman, I can't help but say he's a winner in the NFL draft, because he ended up in probably the most desirable spot that had the least amount of target competition with the best quarterback in, let me rephrase. He landed in the best situation with the best possible quarterback, right? He could have landed in Kansas City and played with Patrick Mahomes, obviously. I don't think that was the best situation for him, though. Buffalo is, and they have the best quarterback out of the best situation. You get what I'm trying to say. I think he's a major winner here. And it's not going to be pretty. I'm not saying Keon Coleman to the moon, but I am saying if there was a spot where Keon Coleman was going to land where I am starting to consider him fantasy relevant, it would have been Buffalo, and that's where he ends up. He has to be a winner.
Keon is an interesting one for me because I think if you are just looking at situation and competition and stuff like that, he's a winner, right? Because he's going into a situation where you're going up against Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Dalton Kincaid. Like those are your competing target getters. The thing that I'm slightly concerned about is Keon is not a separator. Keon isn't necessarily a route runner.
No.
I can't get a read on his contested catch ability. He does have body control, which certainly goes a long way in those kind of scenarios. He just does not win routes very often. So I'm looking at reception perception, Matt Harmon's website. Phenomenal tool.
Yes.
But
if you don't have a subscription, please go do that.
Yes.
I want to try and get him on at some point over the summer too, so we can talk through that because
dude,
his work is phenomenal.
Very smart. Very, very smart. But 20th percentile success rate versus man coverage, 59th percentile versus zone, and 19th percentile success versus press coverage. I have to believe that there is a specific plan for Keon Coleman in this offense. Keon Coleman is not a do-it-all guy that is just going to do everything that you need him to and want him to. He's going to have a very defined and specific role to find success. Will Buffalo be the team to figure that out? I hope so, because if he hits it with Buffalo, look out. That Josh Allen to Keon Coleman connection is going to feed generations, right? But I don't know. I think it's going to take a little bit until we see Keon Coleman find some kind of success in this Buffalo offense. But I keep going back to the point that you were making of just look, he's with Josh Allen. His competition in this team for targets is not super strong. So who knows? Maybe there is a world where Keon Coleman can kind of defy the odds a bit just because he does have Josh Allen throwing him the ball.
I just think there's something to be said when the quarterback says, go out and get me this guy. He's going to make it work. That was the whole bit with Tank Dell and CJ Stroud last year. CJ Stroud said, I want Tank Dell. Go out and get me Tank Dell. Done. And look at what Tank Dell does before he gets injured, right? Like, I'm not going to compare the two. I'm not going to say Keon Coleman is this year's Tank Dell. But if the quarterback says, I want that guy, and the franchise listens to you and says, okay, we're going to go get you that guy and I'll make it work, I find it hard to believe Josh Allen isn't going to find a way to make it work. And he's the only kind of wide receiver on this offense. They went out and got Curtis Samuel. They kept Khalil Shakir. Again, Dalton Kincaid is still around. These guys aren't the big play down the field. Go out and get me one, guys. And Keon Coleman is exactly that. So if I'm Josh Allen, I'm looking forward to slinging it, 50 yards down the field to Keon Coleman regularly this year, going out and taking some shots and watching Keon Coleman go out and get me one for the team. Let's move on, Ty. We'll kind of wrap it up here with another vet that each of us. I think this guy is a sneaky winner. I think the moves that they made to make him a winner are, I don't want to call them under the radar, but they were very necessary. And I know you're going to flush out the case for him as to why he's a winner. So maybe I should just shut up and let you explain why this next player is a winner for fantasy.
Aaron Rodgers, the Batman himself, is a winner in my book after the 2024 draft. Everyone knows, or should know at least, how much the Jets did for him in free agency, but they doubled down in the draft to get him quite literally everything he needs. So there is really no reason for him to not succeed outside of another season-ending injury or something like that. They went out into the draft in the first round. They traded back with Minnesota after Minnesota went up one spot to get McCarthy and they grabbed Olu Fashanu in the first, who was going to be a cornerstone tackle for them. We'll see where he plays on the left side or the right side, but we do know that he will play because Tyron Smith is good to miss at least 4 games every year. So he's going to play at some point. So continuing to build up the offensive line, right, after all the moves that they made in free agency. Then they went out in the 3rd round and drafted Malachi Corley. Everyone that watched Malachi Corley and said, he's the next Deebo Samuel.
No,
he's
not.
He's not.
Nobody could be the next Deebo, okay? I understand why people use that comp. I do. I don't want to call it lazy, but it's lazy. Contingent. It's contingent on Malachi Corley being used the exact same way Deebo Samuel is used. And the only sickos in the NFL who are willing to use Deebo in the way that Deebo is used is quite literally Kyle Shanahan. I'll let you continue.
So I agree with all of it. I remember in the pre-draft process, everyone was like, Malachi Corley is a top 10 wide receiver in this class because look what he does after the catch. And it's like, no, you can be really good after the catch, but if you can't do anything before the catch, I don't want it, right? Malachi Corley, though, in the 3rd round to the Jets, I am all of a sudden very, very, very intrigued, right? Just from the standpoint of Rodgers being a winner in the draft, it gives him a weapon that he hasn't really had before in Green Bay, or in the 7 snaps that he played for the Jets last year. But
right,
Garrett Wilson, pure route runner who can just get open whenever and anywhere on the field. They did sign Mike Williams in free agency. There's no way that this is really going to be the same Mike Williams that we've seen the past couple of years in LA. Malachi Corley is going to give him a short yardage. I'm not going to go as far to say like design touches, but he's going to give Rodgers kind of an out in some ways because he's going to be able to find Corley in the short areas of the field for Corley to go out and make something happen. Rodgers needed weapons going into the offseason because it was just Garrett Wilson. They went out and signed money on Allen Lazard the last offseason. Everyone knows that was a massive failure. They got him weapons in free agency, but they doubled down on it in the draft with Olu Fashanu and Malachi Corley. Aaron Rodgers really should be counting his lucky starts for Joe Douglas in this Jets franchise because they are actually doing him a service that Green Bay kind of refused to do for all the years that he played for them.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you brought up Tyron Smith in the offseason as well. They signed him to play the left side of their line. So again, you get Olu Fashanu, who you and I both agree. He was my 2nd highest rated tackle in the class. I mean, the top 4 were all pretty close, but for him to slide immediately in and play right tackle is huge for that franchise. And I think you and I both agree he has probably the most upside out of any tackle in this class. Joe Alt is like the sure, steady pillar who probably has all pro written all over him. And Olu has the upside to be in that same tier. So to get him on the right side, I think is huge. And again, you get creative with Malachi Corley and, that offense could be really fun all of a sudden with a stunning Garrett Wilson, a little more gadget guy, Malachi Corley, and an offensive line that can protect Aaron Rodgers. So I agree. I do think he comes out of the draft a fantasy winner. I'm going to talk about like 7 different players in one here. And it's all these running backs who somehow, some way managed to dodge major bullets during the NFL draft. Okay. We're talking Zach Moss. We are talking Devin Singletary. We are talking Joe Mixon. We are talking Gus Edwards. Give me another one. I'm missing another obvious one. Zamir White. Thank you. That's the other one I was looking for. All these guys who probably should have had some sort of competition draft. And now I know that the Texans went out and signed Joe Mixon to a multi-year contract, right? But I don't know, unless they really like Dameon Pierce that much, I wouldn't have been surprised if they took somebody. I digress. Mm-hmm. These teams who we are all waiting to draft running back, the Bengals especially, I am shocked they didn't do something. They must just love Chris Evans that much that they didn't go out and try and get someone who could compete. What was that?
Chase Brown.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm signing off for today. Can't get any freaking names right on this podcast. You knew exactly who I was talking about too. Chris Evans. Where did Chris Evans come from?
Illinois last year. Or Chris Evans.
that
No. He was a oh gosh.
He's Captain America.
True. That's America's no, Chris Evans. Why can't I find it? Where? There he is. 6th round pick in the 2021 draft.
Yeah, to the Bengals though, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not freaking crazy. I'm
No,
like, I swear.
buddy.
I'm like, I swear they have a player named Chris Evans. Like, I'm not going crazy here. But
no,
Chase Brown is who I actually bet. Yeah.
The other team that we forgot to mention, Dallas.
Oh yes, yeah, Rico Dowdle. Yeah, that one is baffling to me. I don't know if it was because Jonathan Brooks got taken a whole heck of a lot earlier than they maybe anticipated by Carolina. I don't know if that was it. They had the opportunity to take Trey Benson. They had the opportunity to take Marshawn Lloyd. I don't know what Dallas is thinking here, but these are some guys who dodge major bullets. So all of a sudden, when I'm walking into fantasy drafts this year, and you know what, I take my hero running back in the first round, and I'm looking at Devin Singletary on the Giants, a Zach Moss on the Bengals, Zamir White on the Raiders. These guys who are probably going to end up going 6th, 7th round of drafts. There's going to be nothing stopping me from taking, Christian McCaffrey, one of the top, 4 running backs, punting the position until the 7th round, and then scooping up all these guys because they don't have competition this year. Now, maybe that's a dangerous strategy, but all those guys are massive winners because really these teams probably should have taken a running back. And I don't know if it was just the way the board felt, the different needs they felt they had, teams that, took the luxury of drafting a running back like the Miami Dolphins, the Arizona Cardinals, that just stunned these other teams that were planning on taking. I don't know what it was. It didn't make much sense to me, but somehow almost every single freaking one dodged a bullet except for James Conner and Chuba Hubbard. So those running backs, they're major winners. And I think they're all of a sudden they're much more safer picks in fantasy this year versus, when I was doing underdog drafts before, the big board started, or when the big board was on before the draft started. I was kind of hesitant to take some of those guys, but somehow all these guys dodge bullets.
And I mean, you look at the available running back free agents too. Ezekiel Elliott, Cam Akers, Kareem Hunt. Like, there are no notable names, at least, that will overtake those guys at any point in the season, in my opinion, just because they're aging, they are coming off an injury or something like that. So like you said, dodge all the bullets with all the draft picks that their teams had and not take a running back in the draft, their outlook looks significantly better than it did going into the draft.
Those are our winners from the NFL Draft House. Take a quick break, and we will be back with the losers after the NFL Draft this year. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We are going to move on to the losers now. We can recap the winners quick. First, Najee Harris, Kyler Murray, Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman, Aaron Rodgers, and the slew of running backs that are now members of franchises that decided they didn't need to draft a running back this year. Something I want to add on there quick. I realized I didn't add this point as well. I wonder if teams just thought this year's class is so weak that they sign a lot of these bridge guys for a year and they're going to get replaced next year. Because a lot of these guys, are 2 years, $8 million, 1 year, $3.5 million, right? Like, none of these guys have massive contracts except for Joe Mixon. So I'm wondering if a lot of teams are like, we'll just roll the dice on it this year and we'll reinvest in next year's class.
Yeah, or they just didn't see that this class had many players that would be able to give them, a sizable role in the offense. So
Right.
that's why, you only saw like a handful of running backs go on day two. On day two, there was only 4. Then there was a slew of them that went around 4. Those were all the backs that could have had a role, but then also the teams that took them.
Oh, baffling. I don't.
Yeah,
that was the baffling. See, I wonder if it's a mix of that too. The teams that took them were almost just as confusing as the teams that didn't take a running back in the draft. So
yeah,
I didn't understand it entirely.
No, I mean, Will Shipley to Philly, and it's
yeah, right.
They don't pass to their running backs, and that's what Will Shipley is best utilized. So
Flip Will Shipley and Braylon Allen. You have different thoughts on them then?
Honestly.
I know you got Saquon Barkley, but if you want a guy power formation around the goal line, that's Braylon Allen for you.
Yeah.
You want a guy who can, kind of do it all and, be a do it all backup, a change of pace guy from Breece Hall. That's Will Shipley. Just baffling to me where these guys went. But enough talk on the running back side. Let's talk some losers. I guess ironically enough, we are going to dive into the running backs here, and a guy whose landing spot also really doesn't make sense. But we need to talk about this guy because he has been a product of a lot of hype and a lot of discussion this offseason.
So first loser for me is Kyren Williams. And this was probably one of the more confusing picks that I had for at least the running backs.
This one baffled me.
Because a lot of people comped Blake Corum to Kyren Williams. And Sean McVay himself in the press conference,
yes, I was hoping you would mention this.
Yeah, with him and Les Snead after day 2, he's like, I see a lot of traits that reminded me of Kyren Williams, and it's
gotta have him.
They are very good players, yes. But the thing is, for Kyren Williams and now his outlook for this season, we all know that when Sean McVay finds a running back that he trusts, he doesn't overcomplicate it. He doesn't add other running backs into the mix, right? You look at Todd Gurley, it was just Todd Gurley. Kyren last year, it was just Kyren Williams. And when he didn't have those guys, that's where you saw the likes of Darrell Henderson, I'm trying to think of all the different kinds of running. Malcolm Brown, CJ Anderson.
Sony Michel. Yep.
That's
guys leaving dudes here. How long can we go?
Oh gosh, that was tough. That hurt my brain. Those were years where Sean McVay didn't have a guy that he fully trusted. And so he needed to go with a more committee approach because those guys had specific strengths to their game that McVay liked. So what does that mean now? He really liked Kyren last year, but now he's got 2 of those guys. So I think it was Matthew Berry on his show where he said either Kyren Williams loses work and this is a split backfield, or Blake Corum is one of, if not the most valuable handcuffs in fantasy now moving forward. Because if Kyren Williams goes down, the workload is going to go completely to Blake Corum. But for now, we are kind of stuck in this middle ground of what do they do when they're both healthy, right? For Kyren Williams' sake, it's going to be really hard to buy in on him, especially where he's going to be going in drafts just because of how well he did last year. But again, you've got Blake Corum just kind of looming, just kind of waiting for an opportunity. So I have to say that Kyren is a loser just because everything is so much more confusing now for this backfield.
So I agree Kyren's a loser. I don't know what this does for his load though, because they're so similar, right? They didn't draft a Jalen Warren, I'll say, or a Jalen Wright, excuse me. Man, I'm terrible with names today. A Jalen Wright, right? A guy who has sure hands, can catch the ball out of the backfield. And all of a sudden, Kyren Williams, 32 receptions he had last year. goes down to 10, right? Then you can say, okay, yeah, he's a loser in that way. When you kind of have two of Kyren, is this like, I don't want to have to worry about going out and signing Darrell Henderson again and trying to find a guy who can fit with exactly what I want to do, right? Is this like a luxury stress relieving pick for Sean McVay that he can be more calm-minded when if Kyren Williams misses time again? I don't know if it's so much as Blake Corum's going to come in and take work from Kyren, but he might too. Because I also don't know if Sean McVay wants to play Kyren Williams, 95% of the snaps like he did in darn near every single game last year. So I agree, Kyren's a loser. I just don't quite know how the balance is going to work out, because it's not like Blake Corum is a change of pace guy. They're pretty much the same. Does Corum come in for goal line? Does he come in for third down? Like, I don't know how Corum fits into this yet. I think that's what's baffling to me about the whole thing. But all I know is that it hurts Kyren Williams, and I agree with you in that perspective. Anything else you wanted to add there? It looked like you were looking up something to add at the end here.
I can't find his stats. Where is it?
Kyren Williams?
Yeah.
What are you looking for specifically? 228 for 1,100 last year?
There it is. 228. I'll just say
in 11 games.
That is okay.
That's about 20 a game.
I'd be surprised if
math.
15 touches a game.
Yeah, that'd be 20 rushing attempts per game for Kyren last year.
I'd be surprised if he's getting 15 rushing attempts in a game this year. And
I think that's where it's going to hurt for Kyren. Yeah, I think that's where it's going to hurt is the rushing attempts. I think you see those go down, 3-4 a game, get closer to that, 15 to 18 range. Will it be enough to be fantasy relevant? Probably. But, all these people that are, talking about Kyren Williams as a running back 2, top 3 even, I'm looking Kyren more at kind of the 7, 8, 9 range probably this year. We'll move on. Another loser. I'll name the obvious one. How about Chicago Bears wide receivers? You bring in Odunze. Well, okay. So let me preface this. They draft Caleb Williams. Great. We already knew that was coming, right? Chicago might finally get their first 4,000-yard passer ever. Can you believe that? That is an absurd stat. They're finally getting their first 4,000-yard passer. So we hope. Pray to God that is true, because I don't think I will be able to tolerate the amount of people who will never stop screaming Caleb Williams is a bust. But you get Caleb Williams in there, and all of a sudden, Chicago's a prime trade back candidate at 9. They say they draft Odunze, and now they got this 3-headed beast of DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Odunze. This hurts both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, where we thought, DJ Moore can still play the outside, Keenan Allen still on the inside. These guys can complement each other. They can still generate enough fantasy points. Now you throw Rome in there, okay? And sure, we can say he might be on more of the JSN trajectory. I don't know if that's going to be the case, though. I don't think Chicago is going to be in a situation where they want to just feed DK Metcalf. They want to just feed DJ Moore and just feed Tyler Lockett, and Keenan Allen to no end. I'm like drawing too many comparisons here, right? You draft a wide receiver at 9 and you use him. Seattle drafted JSN at 22, and it wasn't an outright need. It was more of we recognize Tyler Lockett is aging. If something were to happen this year, we have our replacement ready to go. They ended up signing Lockett to an extension. And now JSN is kind of stuck in purgatory. I think this is different, though. When you go out and spend the 9th overall pick on this guy to pair him with your future in Caleb Williams, I think it only comes at the cost of Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. Not every single player in this offense can see, 130 targets. I would be shocked if more than one of those guys gets above 130 targets this year. I just would. Because you also have DeAndre Swift. This team wants to run the football still. They got to help Caleb Williams out in that way. They can't just expect Caleb Williams to stand back and sling it, 45 times a game. I'm kind of out on Chicago wide receivers now. At one point, I was like, I'm in on Keenan Allen. He's the better value. But now I'm like, I don't want to play games. This is a game I played before, and I'm going to lose no matter which one I choose. So I'm out on Chicago wide receivers. They're all losers to me. You might be able to call Rome a winner because he gets paired with Caleb Williams, and that's going to be a fun duo to watch for years to come. But in terms of DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, I am OUT, and they are losers for me.
I think the hardest part for me is I think a lot of people are going to say, well, Shane Waldron is the new offensive coordinator. He's coming over from Seattle.
Where did he just come from?
Yeah, Seattle. And people are going to say, like, wow, like Seattle actually threw the ball a ton, though. Like they were 7th in pass rate last year. You know why, though? Do we remember why they were throwing the ball so much?
That defense was cheeks.
It's because the defense was cheeks and they couldn't run the ball.
Yeah. They
could not run the ball to save their life. So it's not like we can exactly say it's a 1-for-1 in terms of like how Shane Waldron is going to game plan and scheme for Chicago as he did for Seattle. But that just adds all the more like cloudiness to the whole situation, right? We just don't know how everything is going to work together and stuff. Is there a world where quite literally like Rome, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore are the only target getters in this offense? I can see it, but I'm not gonna. It's going to be a risky bet. It's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot of I hope, or I am really hoping, or really thinking, or wishing that this is how the offense is going to be. We just don't know, right? So you're going to have to really be careful of where these guys are going in drafts, who is going to be the value. Because I can't see a world where they aren't fighting against each other. Maybe not, directly, but they will be kind of eating into each other's work at some point.
Yeah, again, as I said, when you get DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, you can see how they complement each other. You can see that you can just kind of stick DJ Moore on the outside and Keenan Allen in the slot, and they don't necessarily siphon from one another. But now you add Roma, across from DJ Moore, and all of a sudden, it's just one big mess. Do you start rotating guys in and out? Do you keep anybody exclusively in a spot on the field? It's a lot of unknown there. And I think at this point, it all starts to siphon from one another. So in years to come, I think Rome is great in Dynasty. I think he should still be at the top of your, rookie drafts. I want to get cute, and start drafting Brian Thomas Jr. or, anybody else ahead of him. I think he's still the 3rd wide receiver off the board, but yeah, it's going to take time. It's going to take, Keenan Allen finishing out his contract in Chicago before I think Rome starts to reap the benefits of playing with, the best quarterback prospect we may have seen since Andrew Luck. Let's talk rookies now, Ty, some rookie losers. And I know this one hurts you because you love this prospect coming in. I think a lot of people are kind of giving him like, really, should he have gone round 1 just because he had a sick one-handed catch? That to me kind of shows you didn't care to look at his film all that closely. Again, Matt Harmon, a guy who grinds this film for reception perception, has nothing but dynamite things to say about him. But unfortunately, I think he got stuck with the short end of the stick here.
The reason why San Francisco made Ricky Pearsal the 31st pick in the NFL draft in the first round was because they knew that he wasn't going to be there in the second round.
Yeah.
That being said, though, there is a lot of hurdles that Ricky Pearsal has to jump over and get through before I really have confidence in him producing at a high level in fantasy. As it stands today on Sunday, April 28th at 4:15 Central Time, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are still on the team. George Kittle is healthy. And, there's a guy named Christian McCaffrey who is still in the backfield.
Can't forget about him. Shout out Luke McCaffrey, by the way. Washington Commanders.
Shout out Luke. The one team that ran the ball more at a higher rate, I should say, than Atlanta did last year, San Francisco. So, look, San Francisco wants to run the ball, and we've talked about this before on the pod. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel complement each other in the sense that Ayuk is their main coverage beater and Deebo is their zone coverage beater. rarely do we ever see them have good games together. Where does Ricky Pearsal fit in all of this? That's essentially the question. Like,
you need an upgrade from Juwan Jennings, though. You got to remember that.
Yeah, I think
all of Juwan Jennings, 45 targets last year.
Jeez. Like, so again, like, I think I love the talent of Ricky Pearsal in the sense of like, wow, he's going to San Francisco, one of the highest powered and highest scoring offenses in the league. Sweet. We're not going to see much of him in fantasy though until some dominoes start to fall with an Ayuk trade, with a Debo trade, with a Christian McCaffrey injury, something like that. So it just stinks because, again, I was a big fan of Slick Rick. I was a big fan of him. It's just a situation that is just not going to be super favorable for him right away.
I gave Juwan Jennings too much credit, by the way. Only 33 targets last year. 38 in 2021.
Clutch catches.
Hey, 56 in 2022. Shout out Juwan Jennings. But it ain't looking good for Slick Rick until one of Brandon Ayuk or Debo is traded. If they get traded, there's no guarantee about that. The whole thing still kind of confuses me because if you're going to have Brock Purdy on quite literally the cheapest deal in the NFL, why would you not just pay the man? And the man being Ayuk, why not just pay him and make sure you have weapons that got you to a Super Bowl? Why? I don't quite understand it. I never fully understand Kyle Shanahan sometimes. If one of those, again, like you said, the dominoes got to fall before Ricky Pearsal kind of finds his place in this offense and has some fantasy relevance. But if they do, I think we change our tune on this. But again, as of April 28th, 4:20 p.m., don't blaze up, boys and girls. Do it smart for your health. Those guys have not been traded yet, and Ricky Pearsal has to be a loser. Plain and simple. He's Juwan Jennings, and if Juwan Jennings is what I'm getting from Ricky Pearsal in my rookie drafts, I may as well just leave him on the waiver wire. I want to do that video sometime. Okay, brilliant idea. I'm going to put this on the agenda for next year is, guys, if we were to draft them in our rookie drafts and you got X player comp in return. I was listening to Brian Rosillo and Todd McShay do this with NFL prospects before the draft of, if Atlanta had 8 drafts, Dallas Turner, and he turns into, name an edge. Are you okay with that? I think we can play that kind of game with fantasy. Because if you did that with Juwan Jennings, everyone's like, heck no. Why am I even drafting him then? So I digress. Let's move on to another rookie loser tie. I was very critical of this pick. I think originally when it was first made, I'm coming around on it a little bit. I still don't see the clear picture. And the Raiders taking Brock Bowers at 13 is just a case of, why don't we just take best guy available here? Despite having holes in our secondary, despite having holes on our offensive line, why don't we just take best player available here? Brock Bowers can kind of help with chip blocks on the offensive line. He can stand in and be tough if we need him to be, 6'4", 240. He's not exactly the prime size you want for an aggressive blocking tight end, but he's so phenomenal in the receiving game that it makes up for it. The problem I have with Brock Bowers is that they drafted Michael Mayer in the early second round last year. Now, again, I have been a known Michael Mayer stan amongst the fellas here. I love Michael Mayer. I'm really sad. He is definitely a fantasy loser as well. Just wasn't really prevalent. So we're not going to talk about him, but I see a lot of people saying, man, you know what? But these guys just play so differently. I think that's a little bit of an overstatement. Michael Mayer is the better blocker. Brock Bowers is the better receiver. If you leave the statement at that, I entirely agree with you. But if you're going to tell me that Michael Mayer, he's a blocking tight end, I would strongly disagree with you. I would encourage you to go back and watch his film in college. I would encourage you to go back and watch some of the catches that he made last year. I mean, this guy can be a receiving threat. Then people say, oh, well, they can roll out 2 tight end sets. Sure. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but we're then banking this pick on being productive based on a set of formations that we hope the coach runs a certain amount of the time. And I just worry that the developmental process for Brock Bowers is going to be so much slower. Well, then people say, well, they're going to use him in the slot. Just make him a slot wide receiver. Cool. There's still this rookie hurdle we got to get over for Brock Bowers, though. It always takes a year for these tight ends, no matter how good they are, to come into the league and be fantasy relevant. I mean, Kyle Pitts is the most recent example we have of coming in and just hitting the ground early. But even then, he was a tight end. I believe he was a tight end 10 his first year in the NFL. Hit 1,000 receiving yards, but didn't catch a ton of touchdowns. Oh, and let's not forget, this offense still isn't that great. Is there a path for Brock Bowers? Absolutely. But man, of all the spots Brock Bowers could have ended up, I honestly think the Las Vegas Raiders might be one of the least ideal for fantasy football. Besides him being behind a Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, et cetera, et cetera. If there's a spot where he can walk in and be the starter, I'm not excited about it being the Raiders, if I'm being perfectly honest.
There is definitely a direction that they want this offense to go in. And I think the offense that I keep drawing a comparison to is Buffalo, and how Buffalo recently went through with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. Dalton Kincaid did play as a bigger slot receiver more often than he did as a traditional tight end. So if that's the way that Vegas wants to go, I can kind of see that then, that you're going to have Bowers just kind of as this big slot receiving option, and Michael Mayer then is your inline tight end. But I said this on draft night. What does Brock Bowers give you in his areas of in his strengths that Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers don't already have as well? Like, I'm just struggling to see how this can all work together as a receiving trio between Devontae, Jacoby Myers, and Brock Bowers. Now, I will also say Michael Mayer was not a Tom Telesco pick. So
that's the other thing.
Is there a world where, again, the capital doesn't hold a whole lot of weight? Because, again, maybe Telesco didn't even really like Michael Mayer last year, which is actually kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, might have actually been kind of true, because the Chargers could have taken a tight end last year. They didn't. They rolled into the season with Gerald Everett as their tight end. All that to be said, though, again, I just can't, at least right now, I'm struggling to see the blueprint. I'm struggling to see what the design for this offense is to be in terms of the receiving game between Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Brock Bowers. I can't put a finger on how it's all going to work together.
So Luke Getsy, he's the offensive coordinator for the Raiders. He ran 2 tight end sets at the 7th highest rate last year. And Cole Kmet had some good games stem from that. And obviously you're going to say, well, of course Brock Bowers is better than Cole Kmet. I 100% agree with you. Again, I'm struggling to see the upside that Brock Bowers lives up to in a Las Vegas Raiders offense. And people will then say, well, it's a long rebuild process. We don't need our quarterback yet. Don't diss Gardner Minshew. Say what I want about Gardner Minshew. Okay, the guy hasn't been a starting quarterback since his days in Philly, right? Is that where Jacksonville? That's where he started. Then went to Philly. Now went to Indy, and then went to. We're talking about a journeyman quarterback here at this point. Okay, like let's not act like Gardner Minshew is Jordan Love. Let's not act like Gardner Minshew is even Brock Purdy, right? I just, out of all the teams that could have taken Brock Bowers, I just don't like that it was the Raiders. And even if they use him in 2 tight end sets again, then there has to be a promise of Brock Bowers is getting the football when you got Devontae Adams. And people keep throwing out Aaron Hernandez or Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce. Oh, the duo of Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. That's such a specific example that has rarely been repeated and worked to such success for fantasy football. If that's the expectation, it's only happened freaking once. I'm not banking on it happening again. So do I think Brock Bowers is the better tight end of the two? Absolutely. Of course I do. Will Brock Bowers end up probably being fine for fantasy football? I do think so. But man, is his ceiling capped with the Las Vegas Raiders right now. And that's what makes him a loser in my mind. Because at one point we were talking about Brock Bowers, as the number one tight end in Dynasty. I'm looking at him as more of like the tight end, 3 to 5 range probably. And I'm probably going to settle in on 4 when I go back through and do my rankings here soon.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's wrap it up, Ty, and talk about 2 more losers. I personally love the landing spot for the rookie, but the rookie impacts the other wide receivers on this team. So as much as I would call Brian Thomas Jr. a winner, I do think you have a really strong point here in describing the other wide receivers in Jacksonville being major losers, and specifically one of those wide receivers.
I'll start with Gabe Davis, who is arguably...
You might only need to talk about Gabe Davis, honestly.
Yeah.
Because Zay Jones is, old news at this point.
Zay Jones was a career wide receiver 4 before signing his 3-year deal with Jacksonville to be the wide receiver 3, and it hasn't exactly worked out enough for him to stay as a wide receiver 3. So like Brian Thomas can slide in right ahead of him for sure right away. But it's really Gabe Davis. Like Christian Kirk will still get his just because he's their primary slot wide receiver. And he did miss quite a bit of games last year. So we can't just go back and be like, oh, wow, like he didn't have that great of a season. He only played 12 games. So this really comes back to Gabe Davis. I just don't understand what the role is now for Gabe Davis after drafting Brian Thomas Jr. According to Reception Perception, 61.5% of Brian Thomas Jr.'s routes at LSU were digs, curls, slants, and go routes. In the exact percentages, 12.1% in dig routes, 29.3% in curl routes, 20% slants, almost 18% on go routes. Here's Gabe Davis's routes from 2023 in Buffalo. 12.7% dig routes to 12.1. That's too similar for my liking. 21.7% curl routes to Brian Thomas's 29. That's probably the biggest difference. 17.2% slants to Brian Thomas's 20. 18.7% go routes to Brian Thomas's 17.9. They were used almost the exact same way. So it's like we're projecting Brian Thomas to be like a very, very solid, very, very good X wide receiver in the league. And it's like, that's what Gabe Davis was used as last year in Buffalo. And that's what I have to think that Jacksonville went out and spent the money on him for, was to be the X receiver, to be on the outside, right? The major difference is that Brian Thomas Jr. got open more consistently in terms of just percentile ranks, right? But the thing is, like, we're talking college ball to NFL football, right? Like, so I'm not going to put in too much weight onto that. But the fact is just that, like, these two receivers are like, they have a very similar skill set. So if the hope is to give Trevor Lawrence two guys who can play on the outside, can get open deep if need be, to utilize Trevor Lawrence's arm talent and his strength to throw the ball deep, fine. I get that. And then just like Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne kind of scrap up everything else. But you have a 143 target Evan Ingram still. Like, it's like, how is this all going to work together, right? And I kind of looked back at last year's, receiving numbers for the Jaguars, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Calvin Ridley's gone. Jamal Agnew is gone. That's 150 targets. Yeah, your guy, the jersey list just took a massive hit.
Oh, that's a major L for the jersey list. I don't have a chair to fall out of right now. Otherwise, I probably would have. I don't even know they let go of my guy Jamal. I'll still buy his jersey. I could probably get it on sale now. That's the best part.
Oh, true. Anyways. You could get it for $5 on DHgate.
That's probably what I could get it for, right?
So I'm like, wow, those two guys are gone. And that's, again, 157 targets now opened up in this offense. Yeah, but guess what? The next 4 target getters on the Jaguars, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne, and Zay Jones, they're all still on the team. It's like, so it's not like all of these targets are going to go to Brian Thomas Jr. They're going to go to everyone on this team. So it's like, I cannot understand. It's very similar to Brock Bowers in Vegas. I just don't know exactly what the what the plan is for this receiving game in Jacksonville. And again, like I said, maybe it is just for Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas to both be on the outside, and they are just going to try to stretch the field for the defense and let Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Etienne kind of take up what's left over the middle of the field or in the short and intermediate parts of the field. But it's like, it feels like it's just a waste of money on Gabe Davis now. If you're gonna invest that much capital into a Brian Thomas Jr., who plays a very similar style, very similar role to Gabe Davis, they're not the same player. I think Brian Thomas is better, but like Gabe Davis's outlook now is severely impacted by Brian Thomas going to Jacksonville. So I tried not to make that so much a negative for Brian Thomas Jr. because I think
you definitely did, which I don't appreciate.
It's much more of a negative for Gabe Davis than it is for Brian Thomas Jr. So again, the loser is Gabe Davis. Brian Thomas will come in and should excel pretty quickly just because he is going to give them a field stretching ability and speed that Calvin really didn't really give them. I'd say that too, like a lot of people cared about what Gabe Davis is going to do for Jacksonville, right? But I'm just looking at rookies after the draft. Who are they coming in and really going to compete against, and who are probably going to lose out in those competitions? And I think Gabe Davis is certainly one of those guys.
Gabe Davis, with any upside that he potentially had in like best ball drafts, even completely gone. Maybe he'll turn in a 30-point game for you this year at some point, but it gives you the one 29-point game Jamal Agnew gives you every year. RIP Jamal Agnew, but
he didn't. I think
die. Brian. He didn't die. Just RIP to my boy not having a roster spot currently. Is he on another team right now?
He's a free agent.
I'd sign Jamal Agnew if I were a Moneyball team. I'd sign Jamal Agnew. That dude is different. He's not built like the rest of them. Let's wrap it up here, Ty. I'll talk about one more loser. Can I just kind of describe my feelings when I saw Jaylen Warren being drafted to the Miami Dolphins? Jaylen Wright. I did it again. I quit. Thanks for tuning in. Devon Achane's my loser. Not only did Jaylen Wright being drafted to the Miami Dolphins this way, but really my performance with names on today's episode, this is what, really it's got me feeling like. I couldn't believe it. I literally posted on my Twitter afterwards. The Hezbollah meme where he's sitting in his eating cereal, turns and looks at the. That's exactly what I felt like. Cameron just goes, "What in our group chat?" And I go, "No, stop! I'm not watching. What's going on?" And I went and I looked at the draft results, and I saw freaking Jaylen Wright's name next to the Miami Dolphins, and I couldn't believe it. Now, is Devon Achane still the running back one here? Yes, I do believe so. That being said, I think you said it perfectly in our group chat afterwards, Ty. It was the Raheem Mostert replacement that's coming here. It's the guy who can come out and get you some work on third downs, but it's the guy who Mike McDaniels looks at and says, look at how freaking good he is in open space. Anybody who is incredible in open space is going to end up a Miami Dolphin. That's how this works. For whatever reason, it's like Kyle Shanahan's the sicko for just like making anything and anybody work in his offense, like making a Deebo Samuel work when nobody else can figure out how to do it. Mike McDaniels is this sicko that says, fastest boy, like it's like it's just like it's so fast. The entire offense is built on speed. He is the only coach that can make it work. You see these teams trying to replicate speed guys, gadget guys, speed guys, and it's like it doesn't work. because you need to have elite tier guys who have speed, but then running backs who have speed. So it's Raheem Mostert, it's Devon Achane, it's Jaylen Warren, all guys who are incredibly fast in open space. It's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So Devon Achane's a loser because I do think Jalen Wright ends up coming in and spelling him of some work, spelling Raheem Mostert of some work, but especially in Dynasty, when we're talking about Devon Achane as a top 5 Dynasty running back, I think it takes a hit on his value because Jalen Wright's going to be hanging around for a while. For Devon Achane is forever going to be a 1A, right? He is not going to be a clear-cut number 1 running back. And you or I think I can speak for both of us. You or I never expected Devon Achane to be a solo lead feature back.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought this might be the year we see, a 65-35 split between Achane and Mostert. Not so much of a, 55-45. Now I'm worried this year it's going to be, like a 50, 30-20 kind of split between all 3 of these guys. And then going down the road in the future, is it going to be more of a 60-40 with Achane and Wright? So where Achane had this, top 5 Dynasty running back upside, I'm all of a sudden very hesitant to push the chips in on Devon Achane and say, hey, yeah, he's our guy. But yet then again, is this just kind of a Blake Corum piece where Mike McDaniel says, I don't want to have to think about playing Jeff Wilson if I lose both Achane and Mostert. I'd rather get Jalen Wright out there so I can still run my offense at the high-powered and elite level that it is. It's an L for Devon Achane at the end of the day. I'll stop my thoughts there.
I'm just going to say this, and you can judge me and react however you want. The Jalen Wright pick for the Dolphins made every single one of them a better and best ball pick than a player that you actually want on your fantasy team.
I don't want. Devon Achane is really the only one I'm still kind of interested in redraft. I don't know how this impacts Raheem Mostert. Maybe he's the bigger loser here. Maybe that should have been the point of discussion, but I think Devon Achane's dynasty outlook still takes a hit too. Achane was going as a top 10 running back. He's going as a running back 8 in best ball, I think.
I get it to a certain extent, but again, I'm thinking redraft and I'm thinking dynasty and stuff. Like, you are just never going to feel comfortable or confident enough that they're going to give you consistent production because their volume is always going to be up and down, always. So again, in a format like best ball where you don't have to touch your lineups at all, you just draft and it just takes care of it for you. Give me all 3 of the Dolphins running backs at that point. But if I'm in my draft, rookie drafts right now, I am not really wanting to touch Jalen Wright at all. I might, just because in our rookie draft right now, secret's out, I do have Raheem Mostert, so I might want to take a shot on Jalen Wright then, just because I've got his backup as insurance. But it's I'm not confident with any of these Dolphins running backs now, especially after Jalen Wright was picked in the 4th round, which sounds weird that we're talking about a 4th round running back, but the skill sets are way too similar for me to feel confident in one of these guys separating themselves from the pack.
I'll wrap it up there because there's really nothing else I want to add in terms of Devon Achane being a loser because of the Jalen Wright pick. Anything you want to add before we sign off, though?
Dynasty, rookie drafts, best ball, it all starts now. So make sure you're subscribed, because this is going to be your place to get all that kind of good information for your drafts and stuff. It's going to be right here. So make sure you're subscribed.
Yeah. Best Ball Mania dropped yesterday. So make sure you sign up with the code FELLAS over on Underdog. That link is down in the description of the video or audio podcast you are listening to. You can literally just click on that link and sign up with the code FELLAS. That way Underdog will know that we sent you, and you can try out, their Best Ball Mania this year. If you haven't played best ball, it's quite literally, you draft players, you let them play the whole year, and your best lineup gets played every single week, and you get a chance to compete for $15 million in prizes. So yeah, take advantage of that. Code FELLAS over on Underdog Fantasy. Get in on the best ball action. You can start drafting literally now. You can stop listening to this episode because we're just about to wrap up and go draft 3-4 teams if you want to right now. So again, code fellas over on Underdog, join their Best Ball Mania 5 contest, $15 million up for grabs this year. Top payout is $1.5 million, I believe, which is crazy. You look at 15th place. 15th place gets $125,000 compared to last year. It was only $15,000. So Underdog is making massive payout changes here. You're going to want to go again, get in on the action. Code fellas on Underdog Fantasy Best Ball Mania 5. We will see you all next Thursday. We're back to 2 episodes a week now. Throughout the summer, heckin' lot of fun. We got a bunch of fun guests we're hoping to get on this summer. We're going to have a guest hopefully once a week, unless if it's, for like a mock draft ranking show, kind of a show where it's maybe less ideal to have a guest on, but we're hoping to have a lot of guests on this summer. We're back to 2 episodes a week now. So make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications so you know when all of our newest videos are out, and you can follow us on the socials as well, because we got all sorts of content coming out for you starting at the beginning of June and even early May here. We're going to start turning out more content. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas, Facebook, TikTok, and here on YouTube. We will see you all Thursday. We'll be doing our own rookie mock draft on that episode, so make sure to tune in. You won't want to miss that. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, y'all. We'll see you all Thursday. Deuces.